This is a very important evening because it brings together some significant Hispanic and Latino artists who are part of an exhibition of significant art both in this building and in the UICA. This began as an idea about a year ago when I was talking to the director of our galleries, Sarah Joseph, and I said, what I'd like to do is to be able to show the diversity of art that's made by people who are in our community. And I think we went a little larger than our community, which is great, because I think the boundaries of any community are really fairly soft. Who we embrace is a matter of who comes to us, who resonates with us, what experiences there are. And I've walked through the collections, and I find that what's there is powerful, both in the individual pieces and the way they speak to us when they're put together. So I'm really glad that this exhibit is taking place. I think it's writing another chapter in history for this place, for this building, for this institution, for this city that I'm very proud of and excited by. I'm also very excited by the panel that we'll hear tonight. I want to bring on, so thank you for being here to be part of this. I want to bring up Salvador Jimenez Flores, who is our outreach coordinator, but also has been the master curator of the entire exhibit. It's really his vision and the vision of his team that you'll see imprinted on the walls and on the floor of the various galleries. So, Salvador, thank you.
I think, thank you, Dr. Rosen. And I think he covered pretty much everything as far as the vision for this exhibition. But more than anything, I want to thank everyone that made this possible. And this wouldn't have been possible without all the artists who are participating in this event, as well as the great work by both venues, UICA and Kendall. In this case, I really want to give a special thank you to Sarah Joseph for all her hard work, Michelle Bozak, AJ Pashka for curating, helping with the curatorial side at UICA, as well as the entire team that made this possible. Thank you to Elena for working on the communication, and of course, thank you, Elizabeth, for the awesome graphics and catalogs that you guys can take one with and learn more about these different artists. And so we're bringing 28 artists from all over the Americas, and these artists have a wide range of works, and it's very diverse as far as the theme and media that they're presenting. So we're more than anything want to create a dialogue with these works and see how the audience react to this. And on top of that, we're also developing additional programming that will happen throughout the exhibition. So every Wednesday, there will be something going on in this building or at UICA. So I just want to say thank you for everyone who made this possible, and all of you guys for being here. I would like to introduce the panel who are just gonna show a little bit of their work. So this will be just a glimpse of the exhibition. These artists are only 4 of the 28, and they're gonna talk a little bit about their work, and then we're gonna have a Q&A.
So I would like to talk a little about my background. So, and I will be talking about in a few minutes about all my influence and all the artists that have a huge impact on me. So this is Francisco de Goya y Lucientes. And when I was a child, I was very curious about everything around. And I grew up in a family that it was a kind of liberal in a very conservative, religious and backward town. So my parents were very interested in art. So, and we always been around artists. And well, my father used to play guitar and wrote short stories. And my mom, the side of my mom, she's coming from a lot of like artists, poets, musicians, painters. And I have two brothers that they are artists as well. So I grew up in this kind of environment. So this image has a huge impact on me. And it was kind of portraying perfectly the things that were happening in my country during that time, during a dictatorship that it was, the Somoza's dictatorship, that it was around in power like 50 years. So this image, it was so strong for me, but I always get into the bookshelves and looking, and I found to the disaster of war of Goya that it was like a huge. So the next image is Gustave Doré. It's from another book that I found there, that is the Divine Comedy. So in the illustration of Gustave Doré, they are very strong, and you know, I was in a Catholic like a town, and always people is talking about hell, paradise, and purgatory, and all this stuff. So it was kind of cool stuff for me to see. So, and he was another impact, huge impact on me. And by that time, I started to draw in because my brother, they were like studying in the School of Fine Art. So this is my brother, Robert. This piece, he made this piece like around 1988. We were in exile for that time. So my 13 first years of my life, I went through a dictatorship, a revolution, an embargo, and Contras. I don't know if you are familiar with Iran-Contras case, and an exile. So we went to Costa Rica because the situation of Nicaragua was very dangerous, and my mom, it was very worried about that. So the title is Nicaragua hoy peor que ayer, Nicaragua worse than yesterday. This is my another brother, Cesar. He is more like a surrealist, but he made this kind of series of remaking. He's living in Washington, D.C., and I choose this image because I think that is perfect for this time. The next one, of course, Picasso. So it was more like about the Guernica, so I grew up in kind of this environment. And another artist is Eduardo Guayasamín. He's from Ecuador, so he was another artist that I get a lot of inspiration. And the last one is Jose Guadalupe Posada, that is a great printmaker from Mexico, cartoonist. He was working in a newspaper, so everything that happened during the day, so he runs and made a drawing, a print, and publish. And the cool of these things of printmaking that you could do like a multiple, so you could print in everywhere. He was doing like designs of and matches boxes and songs, books, and everything. So it was very cool. And it was another artist that I like a lot. So with all these kind of things brewing in my brain, so I come up in 1999 when I back to Nicaragua to live in Nicaragua. I visited the first time in, I think, like 95. And I started to do this series that I call Años de Miedo, Years of Fears. And this series, it was more about doing a homage to the victims of war, during the time that I was living there, during the decades of the 70s and 80s. And this series is not only like talking about Nicaragua, because it doesn't mean that it's like a limited, like a geographical, because right now we are living in the same thing, this war everywhere and happen those kind of things. So, and I wanted to present it as a manner of reflection about how these things affect our lives, not only physically, but also in psychological terms. So this is another piece of this series, and I wanted to show it like around different countries. But it was kind of impossible to travel with this huge show to all the Central America. So, and I come up with a portfolio when I moved to Chicago 5 years ago, and I started to do more printmaking. So, and it was more easy for me to spread the word. So, and I started getting more busy. So this is a series, the Master Prints. So the Master Prints is a series that I employed the process of appropriating masterpieces of art, using at time both their titles and compositional strategies, but inserting contemporary imagery to create new works. These pieces reflect contemporary issues such as environmental pollution, exploitation of natural research, immigration, human rights issues, violence, labor rights, war, and abuse of powers. So this is another piece that you could see there in the show. This is another one. This is a self-portrait, a woodcut. This is another image that it was more like a self-portrait when I was a child in exile with the wall. And this is a kind of collaboration with another artist. That was a portfolio with René Arceo from Arceo Press. And also this one. There is another collaboration. So it's more like I'm using more like satirical things. So, and you see that one too. And this one is another collaboration. It's a general dictatorship in Guatemala. So that one, it was for a portfolio that it was celebrating 100 years of Posadas. And this is a piece, a homage to Gustave Doré. And the last one that is a homage to Dürer. And I think all that's it. I have the 10 minutes. Okay. Thank you so much.
And now we're gonna have Gerardo Acer.
Talking to this. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, KCAD and the UICA for inviting me to Grand Rapids to be part of the Pulso. It's a very big honor to be here, to be visiting Grand Rapids, which is a city that I've always looked up to, actually, because one of my biggest inspirations as an artist, is Alexander Calder. And Oh, okay. Okay, so this is, oops, this isn't working here. Oh, there we go. Okay. So here's a piece in downtown Los Angeles called the Four Arches. This piece is the reason why I became a sculptor. Really didn't have any true direction in life. I just was kind of a young kid, kind of just doing my business. And as I got older, I realized that I wanted to kind of contribute a little more to the world. And the Four Arches was a really, really monumental scale piece that when I looked at it, I said, that's what I want to do right there. I want to build sculpture. I want to be a sculptor like Calder. And the more and more I investigated into Calder, and I looked at his mobiles and his wire sculptures, the more intrigued I was by how deep he was as an artist. And as I learned how important he became as an American sculptor, and Grand Rapids being a city that embraced him with a few of his pieces. So as I look at this photo, I look at, in a sense, a hero. You know, I think he kind of looking down at me right now. You know, again, I think he saved my life. I think he really gave me purpose. And when I look at this photo, how fun it is to be an artist. And I knew coming here today I'd be speaking to a lot of students. And so, you know, I think when you decide to become an artist, you kind of find people to mold yourself after. You try to look for people to influence you. And Calder was definitely that guy for me. And here is a piece that I put in downtown Los Angeles. It's at a college where I learned how to weld, where I went to a welding school, LA Trade Tech. And the piece was commissioned by the president of the school to kind of contribute art to the campus. He felt that art was very powerful, and it was something that this small campus in downtown LA needed to kind of help boost the morale of the students and the faculty. So the piece is titled Education Gives You Wings to Fly. It's a Pegasus in my signature origami-inspired style, and a tribute to Calder in the red-orange, which is a very powerful color for him. Sorry about that. Okay. And so here's a photo of me actually working on this sculpture. And it was, at the time, it was probably my most ambitious idea because I didn't know what I was doing really. And I just said, hey, I want to do something big. And so I had the opportunity. And this is actually in the back of the welding school where they had this bridge crane. And I kind of measured it out, and I said, okay, I'm going to max it out. And so I was given the opportunity, and I went ahead and built this piece. And here it is. I'm putting the top half onto the lower half. And that piece is probably up there, probably about 1,000 pounds. And then down at the bottom, it's probably about 2,000 pounds. And yeah, I kind of welded all that by myself, which was really, really fun at the time. And this is just another photo of me in my younger years, kind of sliding around the artwork in the shop. And it's really amazing that I really learned how to work by myself when building this sculpture and how to move things around. So here I'm just using this palette as a way to slide it across the floor without having to use any heavy lifting equipment, which actually helped at installing the piece at the UICA, because we had very limited access to big doors and stuff, so we had to like slide artwork along the floor. And then this is going to go into like some inspiration, Elzer Kelly. After building the Pegasus, Education Gives You Wings to Fly, I had the opportunity to work for Peter Carlson. And Peter Carlson is a big fine art manufacturer in Los Angeles. and they built work for Jeff Koons, Elzer Kelly, John McCracken, Charles Ray, and Elzer Kelly, which at the time I didn't understand his work. I was like, it's plain, it's easy. You know, here I am folding all that steel, lifting this, and going through all this, and here's Elzer Kelly, you know, a celebrated artist, and it's just a white canvas. At the time, I didn't understand until I had an opportunity to work on this piece, which the people from Chicago might be familiar with. This one here, which is the White Curve, and it's a 64-foot long piece, all white aluminum. And this was probably about 2-3 years ago that it was installed in Chicago. And working on that piece really changed my ideas and thoughts about minimalism. As an artist, what it takes to make something look simple, something to look flawless, and actually the ambition really to do a project like this. And as I learned more about Elzer Kelly, this shape and design has been part of his whole career. And just recently did he actually realize this sculpture, and I actually got to help realize it. Was a very powerful and impacting moment on my life. And now when I design my sculptures, I really think, what would Elzer Kelly, how would he slim it down? How would he minimize all the details just to capture that essence that you're looking for? Yeah, so he definitely big, huge influence on me now. And I actually was in New York in May for his birthday. I got to thank him for that opportunity, so I just thought I'd throw that in there. It's me with Elzer. He just turned 90, so yeah, really cool guy. And I was very grateful for his life and his work. And it was a very big opportunity for me to actually thank him for that. And then the next slide will be Jeff Koons. And going to work for Peter Carlson, I was thinking, Jeff Koons, like, I'm gonna get to work on some really cool artwork for Jeff Koons. And so again, he changed the way I looked at sculpture. And my first influence is Calder. And if anyone's familiar with Calder, his designs are very loose, they're very free. He's literally not cleaning the wells, not cleaning the edges. He's just kind of really feeling it and just going with the flow and balancing. And then on the other spectrum is Jeff Koons, where it just appears flawless. The quality is just amazing, and his attention to detail it blew me away. And when I went to work for Peter Carlson and had the opportunity to work on a few of these balloon sculptures, again, it changed the way I viewed my work in a huge way. And again, I got to see some of his work in New York. Here's a photo of that. And the gold balloon rabbit back there was the last piece I got to work on for Jeff Koons. And I got to work on the knot on the nose. That was my job. But at the time, I was really battling with building their work versus building my work. As you can imagine, this work is very demanding. So we were there putting in long hours, full weeks or days, filling up our weeks with just work and work and work, trying to get this artwork. It was very demanding, very taxing on me. And even though I admire Jeff Koons, there was a point where I had to kind of like break away and stop looking up at these guys and saying, you know what? I'm gonna be my own artist. I'm gonna put all this energy and effort into my work, the same energy and effort that we're putting into Jeff Koons. So in a way, I was kind of like, so in a way, I was kind of like, fuck Jeff Koons. And so at the time, I was designing my next ambitious project, which was my rabbit. and in my style, and playfully messing with Jeff Koons, and in a way breaking away from idolizing him as an artist and taking on and idolizing myself as an artist. And but I still love his work, so it's not. I just kind of having a little bit of fun with that. So I'm here to talk a lot about my process, because we have a lot of young artists here. And so when we go through the process, you know, again, we talk about we talk about going through drawings and the process of making artwork. So here's a project that I did called The Fold, where, you know, again, just starting with the typical sketches. You have an idea, you rough it out, you bring it out, and then into paper maquettes. And in this body of work, I was just really trying to simplify my process and kind of show my process to the world, and just the fine details of my designs. And so I did a whole series just based off this one form. And so here's me in my studio in LA, putting together a few things. This was a very tricky show, so I actually built a little model of the gallery, so I can configure how all these sculptures would be placed in the gallery. Here's some glory shots of me and Sparks. People like that kind of stuff. And then this is a photo of the actual show, so you kind of see scale, and it's kind of playing around with just the orientation of that one shape and how the shadows and the lights all make a separate sculpture in different ways and different forms. And then here's a couple of photos of some work. And this is kind of a portrait of my dog, or the dog I used to have, which is a Pomeranian. Her name was Foxy. So yeah, I just kind of did a sculpture of Foxy. Working on it. More Sparks. I got to show it in front of a really high-end store in Beverly Hills, Minoti. And then this is the series that I'm showing, and they're really it's really a body of work that shows kind of childhood playfulness, your siblings, how you would play together, how you would interact with one another. And it's really nice to see this now, because in the future, this is really just an introduction to my style of work and my characters, which I use to narrate bigger stories. And in the future, these three cubs will be interacting in a different story. And so this is just a nice introduction to that work, and playing with scale. It's a close-up of the cub on a reflective crate, working on the maquette. Actually, that's the maquette. And then again, process, and I use powder coating. And so it's like a very industrial process. So we're in the spray booth putting on the pigment before it goes into an oven to cure. Here's another project. This is the coyote and his victim, my rabbit. And you can kind of see the scale of that rabbit, which is pretty, I think it's about 3,000 pounds and 12 feet tall. Kind of give you another perspective of that guy. And then this is the rabbit actually running. So there's actually 4 sculptures to this series. And this is the approach. And the reason why we put the approach is because as an artist, we all kind of go into it, being an artist or into our work with a different approach. And my approach is really just to have fun. It's just to really get back into being a child in that childhood where I learned origami as a kid. And it was a way for me to play. It was a toy. There were toys. I was making toys, and I was playing with other kids. And so my approach is to be very playful. And so here's a show that I did, and little Olivia, who's a daughter of a friend of mine, and she has my little bear t-shirt. And yeah, so we're just really having fun with it. And it's about youth and vibrancy, and other artists like Jeff Koons, you know, which you don't really see that image of him very much. He's very serious when you meet him, but he's also very playful. And Calder as well is very playful. And we found this photo of Richard Serra, which you don't really see very often, him smiling, and his cool hairdo back then. He doesn't have that hair anymore. And it's just kind of like me having some fun as well in the studio. And I think the approach is really just to have fun. And you know, when you dedicate yourself to art, you're going to be spending your whole life, making work, and you just want to have fun doing it. So the vision, big picture, obviously, as an artist, is to go grand and to go big, and there's a lot of great artists out there today, and Anish Kapoor, obviously, Richard Serra, and again, I like to end with Calder and his beautiful piece in Paris. Again, I love to travel. I love to see Calder's, because Calder's sculptures are all over the world. And as an artist, that's what I... Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'm going to talk to you about some work that's in the show and some work that's not in the show. Starting with this piece here. So I'm a sculptor with a studio practice and a social practice, and I'm a teacher. I teach teacher education. So my work is all over the place. I'm going to start by talking about some of the work in my studio practice and then move into some other aspects. But first, I wanted to talk about, well, this piece is called Gun Love, or Sexy Guns, sometimes I call it. But in 2008, I moved to Chicago from Ann Arbor, and I went to grad school in Ann Arbor, and I moved to Chicago, and I had a really super intense reaction to it when I first moved there, and I think I'm still having an intense reaction to it now. And I lived in a neighborhood called Pulso, where a bunch of y'all live, I think. Hi. I'm going to be talking about you guys, too. So I made this piece because guns were really on my mind a lot, particularly the relationship of this hard, brutal material to soft, fleshy people. And so this piece has velvetiness and sort of a donut in the middle. And also, too, this is one of my more recent pieces. It's actually about maybe the size of my hand. It's called Nostalgia Thinks You're an Asshole Too. Or Nostalgia Takes a Smoke Break, depending on the crowd. But also, too, coming from Ann Arbor, where I really didn't feel a lot of affinity to talking about my relationship to my Chicana identity very much. And I had developed a lot of bitterness around it. So that piece and then this piece from earlier are sort of related to that. This is a piece that I made in reaction to reading a novel, or not a novel, a book by Andrea Smith called Conquest. And in that book, she talks a bit about some ethnic pornography and her feelings about unpacking the meanings of that and essentializing race and gender. And this is probably the closest to a self-portrait, and this is downstairs. This is two shots of the same piece. And it's called Bye Bye Baby. And on this are the images of 3 different cigarette brands. And people have asked me, oh, is this about, conquest and imperialism? And I hadn't really thought of that, but I guess it is. But I grew up in the 70s, when there was the Virginia Slims ad, you've come a long way, baby. And that was sort of like this image of liberation, right? And then when I needed to quit smoking, I found out a lot about power. And I felt really powerless against this force of smoking. But I have to say, right now, I'm smoke-free, extremely smoke-free, for years. Woo! The work that I make is majority is life scale, life size, and there's stories behind each of the pieces. This piece called Bogus is about a friend of mine who I have a great deal of affection for. but everything he says is a lie. This piece is called Don't. And around the time I was making this, I realized that the work that I was making had so much to do with these conversations. I was just having these conversations with people in my studio. And at the time I had a studio that was maybe like 4 times the size of this podium, and it had no electricity in it that was its own, and it came in through this long orange cord, and I had 2 clip lights, and I worked mostly at night. It was just this tiny little space in a building in a community center called the Casa Atzlan. And people would come in there to hang out with me while I was working, and that meant that they were, standing shoulder to shoulder with me. And it was really impossible to avoid making sculptures of them. But I didn't realize I was doing it for a while. So this is actually a guy I know. And it says "Don't" on their neck, but part of a series called Please Don't Cry, Baby. It's about guys who call you and cry on the phone. But I want to talk about the more recent place where my work is right now. And so I'm doing a lot of work about place. And this is something that happened last weekend. On the far side is a graphic generously donated by Eric Garcia, who's in the show here. And on the right is, on this side is, behind the banner is an image that's on the side of a youth community arts center. And it's a mural that was painted by a group of people managed by Salvador. And I wanted to talk about this just for a second because it was last weekend and it's sort of fresh on my mind. And I'm sorry about the Instagram filter that's on this on the left. We had a sort of a collective documentation project going, and there's some people, some very youthful people who did documentation along with this, and I found this image to be really great. There was no permission to cover up that particular mural. So this project is called A Day Without Public Art in Pilsen, and it's sort of a combination between A Day Without Art, if you know, it's commemorating artists who've died of AIDS, and it's 1 day a year, and artworks are enshrouded to memorialize those artists. It's that combined with A Day Without a Mexican. Have you ever seen the movie? You seen the movie? If you haven't, you should totally see it. It's about this big pink fog that comes and sucks up all the Mexicans, and then they're gone. It's a really good movie. So this is a combination of Day Without a Mexican and Day Without Art. So it's A Day Without Public Art in Pilsen. And so what happened is we went out for a weekend and just covered up all the murals. We live in a really vibrant neighborhood, and there's a lot of issues around power and control happening in this very rapidly developing neighborhood. And so part of that was to take away the art for the weekend. This was on Comales on 18th, just on the other side of Ashland, just on the east side of Ashland. And this was, people were honking at us, we were parked in, and there was 2 people trying to take pictures. It was a really complicated moment. But there was about 20 kids walking by and just staring at it, and some people had questions. One of the reactions people in the community had was to rip down the banners and defend the art. People were angry. They wanted to know who the hell we thought we were and what was going on. Another reaction people had was to come over and ask, how long is this going to be up for? And then after we took some pieces down, we took one of the banners down that was on top of Jeff Zimmerman's piece. Y'all have a really gorgeous Jeff Zimmerman over here. We had we enshrouded some of the mural on top of the tortilla factory on Walcott Street by 21st. And after we took down the shrouds, people came by and said, people came by and were looking at it like they'd never seen it before, like this, It was really great. It was a great moment for the project, but I'm out of time. Thanks a lot.
So thank you for this opportunity. And when you speak about your work that spans a lot of years, for me, it's a little bit like opening a book in the middle and sort of pulling out some random excerpt and trying to make sense of it. So I've decided that what I'd like to do is concentrate on two things that are important to me: visual selection that's inspired by place, and also imprinted images. For me, visual selection are those triggers that happen that sort of root your sense of aesthetic. For me, they happened growing up, going back and forth from here to Mexico, and as an adult, traveling as much as I have been able to. So these memories and experiences and travel sort of come together and help me to make decisions as an artist. This work is called Voices of the Children, and it was a series that I did maybe in the year 2000 of about 30 paintings and monotypes that were shown at UICA. They came from the Greek word that originally inspired me, angelos, meaning messenger, and I was working in the inner city at that time and had been for about 10 years, so I was very concerned the fact that children didn't have any voices and that the message was not coming across clearly. So just before this body of work, I had done another series called Notes. It was about 100 watercolors and drawings that examined the marks that we make as human beings, the things that we leave behind that say pretty much, I was here, from the handprints on the cave walls to Stonehenge to children's drawings, graffiti, and so on. So I have been intrigued with this idea of angel and messenger for a long time, for decades really. And I've been interested in that alongside of marks that we make. These are all monotypes. Some of them have been added with wax and paint and other things. For me, I believe that our personal aesthetic, and my students know this, is formed from our earliest experiences, and it's braided together in this sort of unconscious, conscious decision-making that we do as artists. For me, the angel first came into sort of a memory or an imprint when I was a child, and I was at the French cemetery in Mexico City and saw the stone angels, and it kind of blew me away. And I came back years later after the earthquake, and they had cracked, some of them had fallen into the grass or even into other people's space, and I still thought they were really beautiful. So I also remember as a teenager getting out of my car and pulling over and walking across in the snow to look at a stone angel up close. So for me, they've always drawn me in. There's always been this aura of the stone angel. Some of it's explainable. Some of it, I think, is just the aura of them for me. So the reason I'm giving you all of this history is because for me, making art is like overlapping circles. And I keep coming back to similar imagery or similar inspirations. I'm not always conscious of that in the moment, but it comes out in the work. So let's see if I've got this. This is another piece from Voices of the Children. Monotype with some of the children's drawings on top of them. For me, the portions of my paintings that are landscape, some of them are landscape by themselves, some of them are a part of the painting, are about place. I try to travel as much as I am able to, and I always record where I am. Some of these are the same format because they were from the train window in Tuscany and Umbria. And I didn't do them right on the train, but I do these postage-sized little stamp kind of sketches, and then they become larger works later. My paintings really go back and forth between the figure and landscape, and actually between more representational work and abstraction, depending on my idea. These are oil on canvas. They're about 4 by 6 feet. When I was young, I wanted to be an architect, and I always thought that's what I would do, but then I took figure painting, and, you know, it was a lot more instant in its gratification, I guess. But now I'm really interested in the spaces, sort of the confined spaces that we create and we put ourselves in, whether they're elevators or offices and, collections of things and how they play into the space as a whole. This is a piece that's in the show. This is a 5-panel piece called Perpetual Order, and it relates to balance and proportion and ultimately the lack of that harmony in our contemporary world. The piece on the far end that the girl is looking at was inspired from my visit in Peru in 2011 in the salt flats, and you'll see other images from Peru as well. This is the piece in my studio. I used the Fibonacci sequence for the composition, and you can see the gold leaf that I work underneath my pieces. There's sanding in the surface and so on to get those to integrate. The angels. I get asked a lot about the angels. They're not inspired by any particular religious doctrine, so I'm sorry if that's if that's what you were hoping. They're really, angels appear in many religions, but for me, they're not even a documentation of a place like my landscapes. They're more in this larger picture of our human need to leave something behind, something really monumental, something really beautiful that says, I was here, I existed, and this is what I'm leaving behind. My angels come from different parts of the world. These are from the Recoleta Cemetery in Buenos Aires that I visited a few years ago. And she is from Ana Capri, on the island of Capri, a cemetery that's up high in Italy. And I looked at her for several years before I actually painted her. This is a little bit of an idea of the scale of the pieces. This one's about 5 by 6 feet. And there's a little bit of detail of it. There's the gold leaf underneath and the traditional, sort of clay red color that goes with that. In my more recent work, the blackboard is juxtaposed in a relationship with the stone angel. I'm still examining this idea of permanence and impermanence. The blackboard for me represents impermanence, but it still involves the marks that we make. They just get erased and sort of layered over, and the angel is still representing something that we leave behind. In February of 2012, I had a sabbatical, which everybody should have. What a wonderful thing. I was able to travel to New Zealand for 3 weeks. And primarily what I was interested in that travel is what happens when human schedule has to operate around natural schedule. And with the tides, people were continually saying to me, you need to be back by such and such a time, or you're not going to be able to get to cross this land. The water's going to be too cold, it's going to be too high. They're printed every day in the papers. So this work was about those kinds of relationships with the natural world and man adjusting to that. I changed the scale a little bit. This one's downstairs. It's about 4 by 6 feet, again, oil on canvas. And I was hoping to get more of the sublime quality of the landscape by going a little bit bigger. This is a close-up of the angel. This one was inspired by my visit to Peru and sort of this juxtaposition that happens with ancient agricultural practices which have a sacred harmony to them, and the agriculture that's happening today, which is climbing up the mountains. You can see the patchwork of that. And this is also in Peru. This is the Inca culture. As many of you know, the mountains are gods. So this is a female mountain, female Apu, Veronica. And this is downstairs also. I should probably say at this point that I'm not really sorting this visual streaming into any kind of ethical judgment. I'm not deciding if this is right or wrong. I'm really interested in just sort of the poetry of the question. I think sometimes when we find the answer, the conversation changes completely. So my interest is just in asking the question, what happens when we are in this harmony with nature and we're building things and constructing things within that mathematical sacred architecture, and what happens when we're not. I think that very often when we're not, in the earlier 5 panels that I showed you where we're changing the paths of the fish building fish ladders, we're carving mountain roads, we're rearranging everything where the earth really becomes just a place to put the concrete structure that we want to live in, more than ancient cultures that were really more in harmony with nature and built things accordingly. So I spoke earlier about imprints, which for me are memories. And memories for me are all about place. And I was very fortunate this last summer to have a residency in Italy, which went from 1 month to 2 months. And why I came back, I'm still not quite sure, but this was my morning imprint, my sketchbook. I was learning Italian, and my coffee. I went there every morning. I woke up every morning smiling, knowing that this was how the day was going to start. Then I was very fortunate. I had a studio space in a 700-year-old palazzo. These were the doors to my studio. And this was my space. I was right next to the Duomo, so every day I heard that clanging of the bells echoing on the concrete and the light coming in. My paints got held up in Milan, my oils and customs, so the things on the board were all watercolors and drawings. I started out with this concrete plan of what I was going to do there, and I was there a few days, and I realized that was a complete waste of time to have a plan about a place before you've even been in the place. So I just sort of let it go. I had the birds always cooing outside of my window. I started thinking about the myth of Icarus, and for me, these 2 months, it was a personal journey about this myth of Icarus, which for me has always been about dreams and the price that we pay for those dreams, the pattern of those dreams. Things around me. This is an angel that was from the Recoleta Cemetery that I placed against a background that I was trying to sort of echo the frescoes, which were everywhere in the place that I lived. And this was sort of the earlier pieces of this idea of Icarus. And this is the final series. There are 12 pieces there, and then I had a lot of watercolors and drawings that happened at that time as well. So I think I'm probably out of time too. Thank you very much.